Hi, and welcome back to another Tuesday tutorial. This tutorial is a little bit different because we're going to be focusing on the best practices that apply to long-term installations. This information is intended for people who are getting an installer to install their long-term installation, but who are planning to conduct their own maintenance long-term, or for people who are sourcing their own equipment and maintaining it themselves. No matter where you're installing your interactive floor or wall, this information will be valuable to you. Installations in homes, or museums, or retail spaces will all have the same maintenance requirements. We're using as our example an installation that was installed 5 or 6 years ago at the Assiniboine Park Zoo in Winnipeg. For those of you who don't know, Lumo Interactive, the company that makes LUMOplay software, is based in Winnipeg, Manitoba. We all work remotely, and I live in Montreal. I go back to Winnipeg every few months. On a recent trip back to Winnipeg, I visited the Assiniboine Park Zoo and noticed that their installation wasn't running the way that it was intended to. The floor projector was turning off regularly and nobody knew why, and the walls were not interactive. To remedy this, I reached out to the Assiniboine Park Zoo and they agreed to let us come in and evaluate the health of their system. We're grateful that they accepted our help and they allowed us to document the changes that we made to improve the experience of the installation for their visitors. I really like the Assiniboine Park Zoo. We've worked with quite a few zoos, and as far as zoos go, the Assiniboine Park Zoo is one of my favorites. This is because they invest heavily in research and primarily house animals that are native to the region. One of the animals they focus on is the polar bear. This allows conservation scientists to study the bear and make sure that its population is being supported and that while it's facing endangered status, there's enough information available to make good legislation to protect this valuable keystone animal. Our installation is in an area that is beside the polar bear enclosure. It's called the Tundra Playground, and it's themed all around polar bears. A lot of love went into this exhibit, and so it was really important to us that the interactive elements were working as well as possible. Right now, the Assiniboine Park Zoo is preparing for an event called Boo at the Zoo, which has been going on for generations. One of the things that we wanted to do when we came in and inspected the installation was to make sure that the people that were maintaining the systems understood how to change content for seasonal events like this, and how to maintain content for their regular programming. On our first site inspection, we looked at the state of the hardware, and all of the mounts are supported by the play structure itself, which means that they move quite a lot. This has led to the bolts being loosened, and the projectors were all wobbly. On top of that, none of the installations had been cleaned. Projectors need to be cleaned regularly. They have filters built into them, and they need to be changed pretty regularly and dusted on top, just like any other electronic equipment. This had not been done, so that was the first thing that we needed to do. We took out a vacuum and cleaned everything when we came back. On our first site inspection, we looked at the state of the equipment, and we noticed a few things that needed to be improved. The first was that because all of the installations are attached to the play structure, they move every time kids are playing. This has led to the bolts loosening and the mounts becoming very wobbly and unsafe. Another thing that we noticed was that the floor projector was suspended from the ceiling by 4 freestanding wires rather than being bolted to the ceiling by a drop pipe mount, which would be the appropriate type of mount in this situation. On top of that, the projector and the computer are on a platform that rubs up against the play structure, so the floor projector was off kilter and the projection was crooked. Lastly, we noticed that all of the equipment was really in need of some deep cleaning. It's very important to clean all of your equipment regularly. We typically recommend that in high traffic areas, you at the very minimum dust all of the electronics every 6 months. This might happen more frequently in your environment, or if your installation is in a home, once a year should suffice. But all of the projectors and all the equipment has filters. The projector filters really need to be cleaned. The floor projector was turning off roughly every 30 minutes because it was overheating because the filter was so clogged with dust. On the first site inspection, we pulled out the filter and we gave it a quick sweep. But we made plans to bring tools back with us on the second site inspection and tighten all of the mounts, as well as cleaning all of the equipment with a vacuum. The last big issue that we noticed was that none of the cameras on the walls were working. This is because the installer chose cameras that were not supported by LUMOplay and have hit end of life. They stopped being produced and supported many years ago. One of the advantages to using LUMOplay software is that as cameras are deprecated or as they go out of production, you can replace just the camera and LUMOplay software will keep working. But because there was no maintenance contract in place and the people maintaining the installations at the zoo were not made aware of this, the cameras had stopped working and nobody understood why the walls were not reacting to motion. So one of the things that we did when we came back and performed our second site inspection was replace both of the cameras in the walls with cameras that we knew would work. Ultimately, we want to put in the best cameras for this installation, but for now, we're just using what we have. We encourage all of our customers to choose installers that will provide them with a long-term maintenance contract, or at the very least, with a maintenance schedule, something that you can use internally so that you can maintain your system properly. Neither of these things was done with this installation. The first thing that you should do if you're planning a long-term installation is think about how you're going to manage the installation throughout its lifetime. An average LUMOplay installation will last over 10 years, sometimes longer. We have installations in the field that have been running since we started our company over 14 years ago. Those installations still work because we are constantly updating and improving the software, and because the client recognized that they needed to budget for replacement hardware after hardware burned out or hit end of life, or when software, like the operating system, needed to be updated. It's far less expensive to replace parts as you need to, as opposed to replacing an entire installation. We understand that a lot of our clients can't afford a long-term maintenance agreement with an audiovisual company, which is why I'm making this video. If there are 3 takeaways that you take from this video to prepare yourself for maintenance of your long-term installation, they should be: regularly check the hardware and make sure that everything is still bolted correctly and nothing is wobbly. Initially, make sure that your installation is installed in an area that doesn't move. Installing your equipment on a surface that is a temporary structure or against something like a play structure where the equipment is going to move a lot, or even in a gym where it might get hit, means that you have to check the equipment far more often to make sure that the bolts haven't loosened and that your projector and your computer are stable and your camera has not been shifted. Secondly, it's very important to make sure you clean your equipment regularly. You should take down the model number of your projector, find out how much filter replacements cost, and plan to replace your filter at least every year to 2 years, and clean it every 6 months. In a home, you may need to clean it less. In a school or classroom or museum where there are a lot of kids, things can get pretty dusty. So plan to at least clean the filters and dust the equipment once every 6 months. Lastly, it's important to set up your systems to power cycle correctly. We have thorough instructions for doing this on our website, which will be linked in the description below. But the important thing to know is that you can set up your system, your computer, to turn off and on again regularly. This will prevent a lot of burnout and it will help lengthen the time that you can use the equipment. The other really great thing that this does is it resets LUMOplay, and that way you can take a look to see if there are any updates. It's good to update your software once a month. You can also set LUMOplay up to auto start with Windows. This is really important if you want a hands-off experience, so that when your computer turns off and then back on again, it automatically launches LUMOplay and there's nothing you need to do on a daily basis. There are even controllers that can control the power cycling of your projector, so you don't need to go in with a remote and turn them on every morning. But if you can't afford one of those, it is important to turn the projector off when you're not using it, or at least put it on mute if that's an option. Sometimes this setting is also known as standby. The cameras that we used to replace the cameras that were not functioning with LUMOplay were the ones that we had on hand. We used the Gemini 2 from Orbeck because it has a very wide field of view, and we were able to epoxy it to one of the projectors and set it up so that it was tracking near the wall. The other camera that we used was a RealSense D435F, and this camera was pointed away from the wall at players. While this is not the camera that we would choose to use in a long-term installation, and we are planning to replace it, it does give us a lot more accessibility in the space. The floor projector was adjusted so that it was no longer rubbing against the plate structure, and hopefully we'll be able to move it a little bit more so that that's not going to be an issue in the future. We'd also like to adjust the way that it's mounted so that it looks nicer. All in all, the system is running properly now. All the filters are clean. We have the projector models, and we're going to donate some new projector filters to the zoo. And Kurt has agreed very generously to come down every few months and make sure that the system is running properly, that all of the new games that are available are downloaded to the system so that the zoo can use them, and just to make sure that everything is running properly long term. We're hoping that the zoo will learn how to do this themselves, but we do understand that not everybody has the time to do this. So that's why we're making this video. If you have a long-term installation that's misbehaving, please get in touch with us. That's it for this week's Tuesday tutorial. Please check below in the description of the video for links to resources that will help you maintain your system long-term. And remember that LUMOplay is a company that's run by a very small team, and we sell our software at cost to make it affordable for zoos and not-for-profits and schools and other educational facilities to set up interactive experiences without having to invest a lot of money into equipment, maintenance, or software. We take requests for free games, so if you have an idea for a game or effect that you would like to see, you can put it in our community and we will get to it and add it to our library. If you liked this video and found it helpful, please comment, engage with it, like it, share it, and if you want to see more content, please subscribe. Any bit of engagement really helps us. That's it. I'll see you next week for next week's Tuesday tutorial.